Beryl is a middle-aged swordsman who runs a dojo in the middle of nowhere and lives a peaceful life. One day, while he is training, his father turns to him and says he really wishes he had some grandkids to look after. It's been years since Beryl took over as the instructor here, but he's still as maidenless as he was before. Beryl says he's been too busy with the family dojo to think about having kids, but his dad still wants him to at least try. He even suggests that Beryl should try rising up one of his female students so he can get married, but for ethical reasons he refuses. This dojo has been in Beryl's family for generations, and he has been diligently working as the instructor here ever since he took over from his father. Once he dreamed of achieving great things like becoming a famous sword master, but while he is definitely a better swordsman than the average person, he doesn't think his skills are worthy of the sword master title. With that said, he thinks of himself as a good teacher since many of his students have gone on to become successful swordsmen after graduating. Once practice is over, Beryl goes home to have dinner with his parents, but his dad is still insisting that he get married already. Beryl's dad tries to get his friend to pressure Beryl into finding a wife, but she says these things take time, so there's no need to rush him. However, she is still expecting Beryl to give her a grandbaby. Beryl chokes on his food a little because that's a lot easier said than done, especially since he doesn't even have a girlfriend yet, and it's not like a pretty girl is just going to show up at his door. A few seconds later, there's a knock at the door, and Beryl opens it to find a pretty girl standing there. She greets him as her master, and after taking a closer look at her, Beryl realizes that she is one of his former students, Alicia Citrus. Beryl invites her inside and offers her a cup of tea so they can catch up. Beryl remembers Alicia being a gifted student back when he trained her, but he never could have expected that she would become the commander of the Royal Knight Order. Anyway, Beryl asks her why she came to visit, so Alicia explains that part of her duty as Knight Commander is to train new recruits, so she took it upon herself to recommend Beryl as a special sword instructor. She even got approved as an Imperial Order, so she came to inform Beryl of the good news. Beryl never asked to become an Imperial instructor, so he considers declining the offer, but his dad tells him that people can get executed for disobeying an Imperial order, so he can't just ignore it. Alicia assures Beryl that he won't be killed if he refuses the offer, but he would probably face severe consequences for it, so he had better just go along with it. She already has a carriage waiting to take them to the capital, so they can leave now, and tomorrow, she'll give him the details of his new job. Beryl can't believe Alicia expects him to leave right now, but his dad is already on board with the idea, so he wishes Beryl good luck and tells him to find a wife for himself while he's in the capital. In fact, he says Alicia would make a great wife for Beryl, but Beryl tells him to stop saying stuff like that because it's making Alicia uncomfortable. There's way too much of an age gap for him and Alicia to become a couple, but Alicia mumbles under her breath that she wouldn't mind. Anyway, Beryl doesn't want to find out what the severe consequences are, so he agrees to the offer and accompanies Alicia to the capital. While the two of them are sitting in the carriage, Beryl notices that Alicia is still using the sword he gifted to her. This is a sword Beryl gives to all the students that graduate from his dojo, and Alicia has taken special care of hers ever since she got it. Beryl is glad to see that she values his gift so much, but he doesn't think sword is good enough for a knight commander like herself to use. He says she could find something better at any other blacksmith, but Alicia says this sword is the perfect one for her. Beryl assumes she must be so attached to that sword because as her former master, she still believes that anything she gets from Beryl is superior, but he is just an ordinary swordsman, so he'd never be able to cut it as a special instructor. Just then, Alicia speaks up and says she is so excited that the hillbilly sword master is finally coming to the capital. Beryl has no idea who she's talking about because he's not a hillbilly, and he's definitely not a sword master, but she tells him that he is well known in the world of swordsmanship. He has trained dozens of students who went on to become legendary swordsmen and adventurers, so he is a bit of a living legend, although Alicia isn't happy with the nickname he got. Beryl finds the story interesting, but he is convinced that Alicia is the only one who thinks of him as a sword master. Soon, they arrive at the royal capital, so Alicia drops Beryl off at an inn so he can rest, and she says she'll come pick him up tomorrow morning. The next day, Alicia takes Beryl to the castle and introduces him to the Knight's Order. She informs all of the recruits that Beryl is so strong that even she would be no match for him, so they should feel honored to have such a skilled man as their teacher. However, a couple of the knights don't think Beryl deserves to be in such a high position, and one of them is particularly unhappy about this. A little while later, Beryl is talking with Alicia in the halls, and she is congratulating him for officially becoming a special instructor. She tells him he only needs to come in to train the recruits 3 or 4 times a month so it shouldn't interfere too much with his usual lessons at the dojo. Just then, a girl comes running up to Beryl, and she is so excited to see her master again that she can hardly contain herself. Her name is Karuni, and she was a student at Beryl's dojo 2 years ago. He recalls that her dream was to join the Knight's Order, so he is glad to see that she actually made it happen. Although Karuni is still only a trainee, so she's still got a lot of work to do before she can become a proper knight. With that said, she is happy that she'll get to train under Beryl again, and the same goes for Alicia. Later that day, Beryl returns to his home, but as he opens the door, he finds that yet another one of his students has come to pay him a visit. His name is Randrid, and he came to introduce Beryl to his wife and newborn child. Beryl is happy to see that Randrid is doing well, but his father cuts him off and says Beryl shouldn't bother coming home until he has a wife and kid like Randrid over here. Speaking of Randrid, after graduating from Beryl's dojo, he went on to become a platinum rank adventurer, but now that he has a child he wants to retire and move back into the village. Platinum rank is pretty hard to achieve, so Beryl is surprised that Randrid is willing to give it up so easily. But then again, being an adventurer is dangerous works, so he probably doesn't want to risk it while he has a child to take care of. While he's here, Randrid promises to do his best to run the dojo, but Beryl has no idea what he's talking about. Beryl's father tells him that since Randrid is decently skilled, he can take over as the dojo's instructor, and that means Beryl won't have to stay here anymore, so his father is kicking him out, even though Beryl owns this house. The next day, Beryl explains the whole situation to Alicia, and explains that he needs to find a house here in the city. The inn he selected yesterday was a little too luxurious for him to stay there permanently, so he wants to find a place that's more affordable, and Alicia is more than happy to help him look. She asks him if he'd like to come and live at her house, but Beryl doesn't think that would be appropriate, so much to Alicia's disappointment, he turns her down. Alicia then asks him if he would like to get some food with her since it's lunchtime, and Beryl is fine with that, so they start heading for a restaurant. However, while they are walking, someone calls Alicia shameless for walking around town with a man and calling him master without a second thought. The girl and Alicia seem to have an unpleasant history together, and the girl thinks it is outrageous that a proud knight commander would be running around with a random man. Beryl has been trying to hide his face so he can avoid conflict, but the girl wants to see his face, so she pulls the map down, and as soon as she recognizes Beryl, she calls him master too. Beryl is confused by this because he has no idea who she is, so she reminds him that her name is Serena, and he once saved her and taught her how to use a sword. It takes a while for Beryl to remember, but he eventually recalls finding an injured girl 20 years ago. He took her in, nursed her back to health, and eventually taught her how to fight, but he hadn't seen her in over a decade, so he's pleasantly surprised to see that she's a black rank adventurer. Serena apologizes for not visiting Beryl all these years, but she's also curious as to why he is suddenly in the royal capital. Alicia explains that Beryl has been appointed as a special instructor for the Knight's Order, so he is moving to the capital, and she is here to help him find a suitable inn. However, Serena says she'd be much better at finding accommodations because as an adventurer, she was used to staying in inns. Serena and Alicia start arguing over who gets to go house hunting with Beryl, and Beryl has no idea why the two hate each other so much, but with their help, he eventually manages to find an inn that suits him. He thanks both of them for their help, but he asks them to please stop arguing with each other for his sake because he can't listen to any more yelling. Out of respect for Beryl, the two of them stop arguing with one another and quietly walk home. Beryl watches them from a window, and while he can't say he will enjoy all the excitement of city life, he thinks it's nice that he will have so many of his students around to take care of him. The next day, the Knight's Order is training as usual, and the Vice Commander, Blitz, is absolutely dominating all the others with his skill. After defeating his sparring partner, Alicia suddenly makes an announcement and informs everyone that there has been a change to the schedule. Instead of once a week, Beryl will be instructing them starting today, so she expects them to work harder than ever before. Beryl tells them all that he is happy to be here, but before he can begin his first lesson, Blitz approaches and says he has something to say. To be a special instructor for the Knight's Order, Beryl would need to possess a certain level of strength, so he is challenging him to a duel. Blitz isn't trying to be disrespectful, he simply wants to make sure that Beryl is good enough for the position, and as the Vice Commander, he is within his rights to ask for a duel, so Alicia sanctions it. Beryl really wishes she would stop agreeing to things on his behalf, but since Blitz challenged him, he has no choice but to get ready for the duel. Blitz is sure that Alicia only thinks highly of Beryl because he was her instructor when she was a kid, but that doesn't mean Beryl is cut out to be a special instructor for the Knight's Order, so Blitz is going to prove that by defeating Beryl right now. Beryl agrees with Blitz because he doesn't think he is good enough for this job, but it would look bad for Alicia if the man she recommended lost easily, so he decides to do his best against Blitz. The duel commences, and Blitz charges in to attack Beryl. Beryl begins parrying the attacks, and he is amazed by the sheer power and speed that Blitz possesses. But he knows that if he can deflect one of the strikes just right, then it will leave Blitz wide open and he can close in for a strike. That's exactly what he does, and Blitz is left speechless because in a real battle, he definitely would have died just now. That counts as a point for Beryl, so the two of them return to their starting positions and Blitz begins attacking again. Beryl still can't believe how strong Blitz is, but all his moves are predictable, so it was pretty easy for him to parry. Blitz realizes he won't hit Beryl if he doesn't go all out, so he uses his signature move to attack. The Warring Blade technique has so much power behind it that it can't be blocked or parried, so there should be no way for Beryl to win here. However, after Blitz swings his sword, Beryl disappears and reappears behind him with his sword next to Blitz's neck. With this, Beryl has officially won the duel, and Blitz isn't even mad about it. He is just amazed by the skill Beryl just displayed, and he apologizes for being so rude earlier. Later on, Blitz holds a party to welcome Beryl as the new instructor, but he still really wants to know how Beryl managed to counter his signature spin move. Beryl explains that all he did was move along with Blitz's rotation, which is how he ended up behind him, but doing it is a lot harder than Beryl makes it sound. In any case, Blitz is looking forward to training under Beryl, and so are the others. It's been about a week since Beryl started working as an instructor, and while two knights are busy sparring on the training grounds, he strolls over to give them a quick pointer. He's been observing their movements for a while now. Their swordplay is solid, but Beryl tells them they need to fix their spacing. He demonstrates how if you're too focused on tracking your opponent's blade, they can close the gap before you even notice. It might not seem like a big deal, but in an actual duel, even half a step can decide the outcome. Beryl figured he was just handing out some basic tips, but from the way everyone is staring at him like he just dropped divine wisdom, you'd think he reinvented swordsmanship. Ever since that duel with Blitz, the knights have been hanging on his every word like it's scripture. Honestly, Beryl can't complain because it's definitely made training smoother. After the session ends, Beryl takes a seat to cool off, and Blitz walks over and hands him a towel to dry off. A little while later, Karuni strolls up and asks if Beryl's got anything going on after this. He wasn't really planning on doing much, and that's all she needs to hear before asking if she can give him a little tour of the city. Beryl thinks about it, and realizes he hasn't really seen much of Baltrain yet, so he agrees. Karuni practically lights up with excitement, and darts off to change into something more casual. Elsewhere, Alicia is neck-deep in meetings with royal officials delivering an update on the Night Order, especially concerning their newly appointed special instructor. She assures them that Beryl has already gone above and beyond expectations. With nothing more to cover, the meeting wraps up. Before taking this role, people warned her. If you want to keep honing your sword skills, don't become knight captain. The bureaucracy alone will drag you down, but she didn't take this position for herself. She took it because it was the only way to bring Beryl here to the capital. Years ago, when Alicia was still a little girl, her parents brought her to Beryl's dojo to learn self-defense, and from the very first moment she met him she could tell he was a good man. And once she joined the dojo, Beryl had her practicing sword swings, hopping from stump to improve her footwork, and working on her strength with simple exercises. His methods might have been unusual, sure, but under his guidance, wielding a blade started to feel second nature. One day, Beryl asked Alicia if she wanted to spar with him, and she instantly agreed, excited to show off everything she learned. But the moment their mock battle started, she realized she couldn't find a single opening in his stance. Growing up under Beryl's guidance, Alicia had assumed that all sword instructors were as skilled as he was. But that illusion shattered one day during a group trip to a dojo-wide mock battle against another school. Her opponent in that match was the definition of sloppy. He left his guard wide open and charged in with the strategy of a 5-year-old, no patience, no control. And Alicia absolutely wiped the floor with him. So, the match was over before it even started. After the event, Beryl and the group were walking back to their dojo, and he seemed pleased that his students got to test themselves against different styles. Along the way, Alicia asked if their dojo was just better than the others because their dojo won every battle. Even Beryl himself won against their master. But Beryl didn't like thinking about it in terms of who's better. Sure, they won today, but the real takeaway wasn't about victory. It was about what they learned from the experience. Alicia got the message, but then she suddenly noticed that her hairpin was missing. She must have dropped it back at the other dojo, and it meant a lot to her. So, she told Beryl she'd go back to find it. By the time she returned to the rival dojo, she started searching around for it, only to see that the guy she beat earlier had picked it up. For a second, it looked like he might just hand it over and act like a decent human being. But of course, that would be too easy. So instead, he chucked the pin into the dojo behind him and told Alicia she'd have to fight all of them if she wanted it back. He may have lost earlier, but with backup, he was sure he could win this time. Now, judging by how bad their sword skills were before, Alicia probably could have taken them all down on her own. But she knew Beryl wouldn't want her using her training to beat people senseless out of pride. So, she stood her ground and braced herself for the hit, ready to take it rather than fight back. But before the guy's swing could land, Beryl stepped between them and took the blow himself. The strike didn't hurt him much, but he still winced a little. Looking straight at the group of boys, he calmly asked if this was really the kind of swordsman they wanted to be. The damn fool still doesn't get how messed up his actions are, so he winds up and tries to smack Beryl on the head this time. But Beryl effortlessly ducks under the swing and in one quick move knocks the sword right out of his hands. Before anyone can blink, Beryl is already parrying blows from the rest of the guy's friends, keeping them at bay with clean, controlled strikes. But before things can spiral any further, the head of the dojo rushes in. He heard the commotion and got there as fast as he could, and he's clearly ashamed of what he's walked into. With a heavy heart, he kneels down and offers a sincere apology to Beryl, swearing that something like this will never happen again under his roof. On the walk back, Beryl and Alicia walk side by side, and he explains that he had a bad feeling the moment she went back for her hairpin, so he followed her just in case. Alicia feels awful that Beryl ended up getting hit because of her, but he reassures her it wasn't anything serious. Besides, she didn't do anything wrong, so there's no reason for her to blame herself. If anything, he blames himself for letting his student walk into a place that could have been dangerous without supervision. Years pass, and Alicia is now sparring with Beryl again. His technique hasn't lost an ounce of sharpness, but this time as he swings, Alicia is actually able to keep up, and for the first time ever, she lands a clean point on him. Beryl is genuinely impressed with how far she's come, so he tells her that she's ready, it's time for her to graduate from the dojo. And with pride, he presents her with her ceremonial graduation sword. By this point, Alicia had come to understand that Beryl had no idea just how insanely talented he really was. She didn't want to leave the dojo because there was still so much she could learn from him. But she also didn't want to push back and make things complicated for him either, so instead of arguing, she made a promise to herself. She would prove to the world that Beryl's teaching stood above all others. That's why she joined the Knight's Order and took the entrance exam. And just as she had predicted, when the entrance exam finally came around, none of the other applicants stood a chance against the training Alicia received from Beryl. Even the proctor struggled to keep up with her, so if they couldn't handle her, they definitely wouldn't have lasted 2 seconds against Beryl. His reflexes were unreal, and his ability to read people mid-fight was on a completely different level. To Alicia, there was no question in her mind Beryl was the strongest swordsman alive. But the man himself had no clue how skilled he truly was. And knowing him, he'd probably be perfectly content staying some nameless sword master living a quiet life in the countryside. Alicia, however, refused to let that happen. So, bit by bit, she climbed her way up through the Knight's Order, gaining rank and influence, all with one goal in mind, giving Beryl the recognition he deserved. By the time she had finally earned the title of Knight Commander, it had already been a full decade since she left Beryl's dojo. And in that time, he somehow became even more impressive than she remembered. A part of her still feels a little guilty about appointing him as a special instructor without asking his permission first. But really, it was the only way to get him to leave that tiny village and give the world a chance to witness his greatness. Back at the training grounds, Alicia heads over to check in with Henblitz, and asks how the training went with Beryl today. Henblitz tells her it was fantastic because everyone learned something valuable from his lessons. Alicia then looks around, but she doesn't see Beryl anywhere, so she asks if he already went home. That's when Henblitz mentions that Kuruni had asked him to walk around town with her. As soon as she hears that, Alicia feels a little sting of jealousy. After all, Kuruni basically asked Beryl out on a date, and now she wishes she'd thought of it first. Meanwhile, Kuruni is showing Beryl around the city, happily pointing out the popular spots and hidden gems along the way. Beryl is honestly blown away because compared to the quiet life in his village, this place is practically bursting with energy. Though he does find it a little odd that she brought him to the Western District, since he thought the main attractions like the Church Palace were all in the Northern District. Kuruni admits he's right about that, but once you've lived here long enough, those places kind of lose their charm. You see them so often, they stop feeling special. Still, Beryl was hoping to check them out because that was actually something he had been looking forward to. As they continue strolling through the market, Beryl suddenly hears someone calling out to him. He turns toward the voice and spots a young woman approaching. She's cheerfully calling him master, which means she must have trained under him at some point, but for the life of him, Beryl can't figure out who she is. The girl seems pretty familiar with Kuruni too, but that doesn't help much either. Clearly disappointed that her teacher doesn't recognize her, the girl gestures to the sword at her side as a hint and says she's one of his graduates. Beryl thinks for a moment, then it finally clicks. Her name is Facel, and she used to train at the dojo alongside Kuruni, but that was years ago. Back then, she looked completely different, which is probably why it took him a second to place her. It's been 5 years since he last saw her after all, so of course she's changed. But from the looks of it, she's done really well for herself because she's currently one of the top officers in the capital's magic corps. Beryl is genuinely happy to hear that she's thriving, but he's also a little surprised because he doesn't remember teaching her anything about magic, so this career choice catches him off guard. Kuruni then asks Facel if she's out shopping, and Facel explains that she came to pick up some magic accessories. That term's unfamiliar to Beryl, so Facel picks up one of the items and explains that it's a tool that lets just about anyone use magic. Of course, she doesn't need them herself because she's more than capable of casting magic on her own. Beryl is pretty shocked to learn that. He knew Facel was good, but he didn't expect her to be this strong. Then again, she did say she's with the magic corps, so it adds up. Just then, a scream cuts through the street. A woman nearby yells that someone's stolen her purse. Beryl instinctively prepares to give chase, but before he can move, Facel steps forward and says she's got it covered. She draws her sword, channels magic into it, and sends a burst of energy flying toward the thief. In a flash, the magic wraps around the guy's legs, knocking him flat onto the street. Before he can scramble back to his feet, Kuruni swoops in and restrains him with ease. Beryl watches the whole thing unfold, impressed by how smoothly the two handled it, especially Facel because her sword magic is unlike anything he's ever seen before. Facel then explains that she wraps her blade in magic whenever she fights, and Beryl's sword training actually made it easier for her to tailor her spellcasting for close combat. She's genuinely thankful for everything he taught her, and Beryl in turn is glad to see one of his students still making good use of the fundamentals he drilled into them. The next day, Beryl wakes up very early and heads out for a walk around the city, like it's morning routine. As he's taking in the sights, he hears someone calling out his name. He turns to look and sees a small girl standing a few feet away. Thinking she's a lost child, he bends down a bit and gently asks if she needs help finding her parents. That's when she gets loud and snaps at him for treating her like a kid. According to her, she's actually the leader of the entire magic corps. Beryl assumes she's just playing a fantasy game, so he doesn't bite. The girl is visibly annoyed that he won't take her seriously, so she holds up a finger and casually conjures a giant fireball to prove her point. At that moment, Beryl starts to believe she's telling the truth because no kid should be able to pull off something like that. She scowls at him again and tells him to stop calling her a kid. Her name is Lucy, and while she may look tiny, she insists she's a full-grown adult. Well, maybe grown is a bit of a stretch, but she insists she's much older than Beryl, and she won't tolerate being treated like a kid. Apparently, Ficelle had told Lucy all about him and hyped him up like some sort of sword legend, so Lucy came out to meet him in person. She's impressed that Ficelle turned out to be such a badass swordswoman and figures Beryl must be a top-tier teacher, but Beryl tries to downplay it, saying that Ficelle's progress is her own doing and he only helped her get started. Out of politeness, Beryl keeps walking with Lucy, but she eventually guides him toward a wide-open plaza, and any seasoned adventurer knows what's about to happen. Lucy tells him she trains her magic every single day, constantly trying to improve, but she doesn't have many people she can spar with. That's why, now that she's met the so-called sword legend in person, she wants to test herself against him. Before Beryl can even say no, Lucy hurls a fire blast straight at him, forcing him to leap backward to avoid getting roasted. He really didn't want to fight this early in the morning, but by the look in Lucy's eyes, it's clear she won't back off until she gets the duel she came here for. With no other choice, Beryl draws his sword and gets ready to face her head-on. Lucy then unleashed a massive fireball toward Beryl, forcing him to leap aside and sprint around the battlefield, carefully dodging every fiery attack she hurled his way. Fireballs continued raining down, but Beryl effortlessly evaded or parried each one. Seeing her current tactics weren't enough, Lucy switched gears and conjured 3 giant ice balls, sending them hurtling toward Beryl. Despite their enormous size, Beryl easily sliced each one cleanly in half with a single swift stroke of his sword. Witnessing Beryl's incredible swordsmanship firsthand, Lucy became even more invested in their duel. Beryl, however, wanted to wrap things up quickly, so he charged toward her, careful not to cause real harm, planning to use the hilt of his sword to simply knock her unconscious. But just as he came within striking range, Lucy engulfed herself in intense flames, forcing Beryl to immediately jump back. For a brief moment, Lucy had genuinely feared she might lose if she allowed him to close the distance. Realizing how tough it was to counter magic attacks using just swordsmanship, Beryl wished he could use magic too. Lucy, however, was nowhere near finished. She summoned even more fireballs, this time directing them behind Beryl, forcing him to retreat and dash around the field again. Lucy chapeled at the sight, amused by seemingly directionless Beryl's running. Since this was his first battle against a wizard, he truly had no prepared strategy. Eventually, the barrage of fireballs subsided, giving Beryl a moment to catch his breath. Just when he thought it was safe, Lucy dropped a massive ice ball from above, aiming directly at him. Beryl spotted it just in time, quickly parrying it back toward Lucy. Without hesitation, she shattered it easily with another burst of flame, but the collision created a dense mist that obstructed her vision. Seeing an opportunity, Beryl dashed forward through the mist to land a decisive strike, only for Lucy to unleash lightning magic at the last moment, knocking him backward. Despite his efforts, Beryl had yet to land a single solid blow, but neither had Lucy succeeded in hitting him, leaving her frustrated by their stalemate. Determined to end the battle quickly, Lucy decided it was finally time to use her trump card. Noticing her pause momentarily, Beryl believed he finally had an opening, but he abruptly halted his advance when he saw Lucy summon what appeared to be a black hole. He wasn't entirely sure what would happen if he approached it, but instinct told him it was dangerous, so he stood his ground and waited cautiously. However, after a tense moment, Lucy sighed and dispelled the spell completely. Seeing Beryl remain perfectly composed even when faced with such powerful magic, made her realize continuing was pointless. Admitting she'd taken things too far, Lucy apologized sincerely, and told him they could call the fight for the day. Beryl felt immensely relieved now that his duel with Lucy was finally over, and it had been nerve-wracking to face someone as formidable as her. Curiosity soon got the better of him though, and he asked Lucy what would have happened if she'd actually unleashed that last spell. Lucy casually explained that, in theory, the spell would have ripped his body to shreds. Still, she now understood why Ficelle admired him so deeply. Any ordinary person witnessing that spell would have fainted on the spot. This was the first time she'd encountered a swordsman who'd keep his composure so effortlessly. Feeling genuinely remorseful for dragging him into an unexpected fight, Lucy invited him to the Magic Institute later, promising she'd personally make it up to him. Later that day, Beryl went about his usual routine, instructing the students at the training hall. During his break, he coincidentally ran into Ficelle in a hallway, who had come by to deliver healing potions from the Magic Institute. She offered Beryl a potion, insisting he take it as an apology for Lucy's earlier behavior. Beryl initially tried to refuse, knowing just how expensive healing potions could be, but Ficelle reassured him it was on the house this time. Beryl admitted to Ficelle that up until now, he'd been half convinced Lucy really was just a young girl. Ficelle laughed and clarified that Lucy used magic to maintain her youthful appearance. Her real age was anyone's guess. Still, Beryl found it incredible that someone so small could hold so much power. He confessed he genuinely feared for his life during their duel, and that he had no desire to face another wizard anytime soon. Ficelle assured him Lucy was a unique exception. Most wizards couldn't cast spells as rapidly or continuously as she did. Ficelle was confident Beryl could easily handle himself against the average wizard. At that moment, Alicia arrived, interrupting their conversation. She informed Beryl that he had just received a special request. Intrigued, Beryl followed her into another room, where they find Serena waiting. She explained that the Adventurers Guild had specifically asked Beryl to organize special training sessions for the newest adventurers, helping them prepare for their first dungeon exploration. The mention of rookie adventurers stirred up old memories for Beryl, reminding him of his own youthful dreams. Once upon a time, he'd aspired to become an adventurer himself, excited by the valuable treasures found in dungeons. But that dream didn't last long because he got his ass handed to him by monsters on day one and ran back home with a busted ego, and that was the end of his adventuring career. Beryl shared his concerns with Serena and Alicia, pointing out that adventuring was a dangerous occupation. But that was precisely why they wanted him to handle the new adventurers training. They assured him that all necessary preparations had already been taken care of, and the task wouldn't interfere with his existing role as a special instructor. In other words, there was nothing stopping him from accepting. Still, the final decision rested with Beryl, so Serena suggested he come to the Adventurers Guild and discuss the job directly with the guild master. Since the Adventurers Guild was close by, Serena led Beryl there immediately, and upon entering the guildmaster's office, Beryl was taken aback to find Lucy already sitting on the couch, waiting for him like it's totally normal. Turns out she caught wind of the job offer, and since she and the guildmaster go way back, she sprinted over the second she heard about it because she was eager for another chance to meet him again. Shortly afterward, the guildmaster Nidus introduced himself warmly. After hearing so many good things about Beryl from Serena and Lucy, Nidus was absolutely convinced they'd chosen the perfect candidate. Beryl attempted to remind Nidus that he hadn't actually agreed to take the job yet, but Nidus cheerfully ignored his protests. Nidus then gestured toward his assistant Mei-Jin, instructing Beryl to speak with him about the specifics of the job. However, before discussing anything else, Mei-Jin wanted to clarify a few important points. He asked Beryl if he had any prior experience as an adventurer. Beryl honestly answered no, causing Mei-Jin to question whether he was truly qualified to instruct new adventurers. Beryl inwardly felt relieved at this skepticism, hoping it might provide him an excuse to avoid accepting the job. However, Megan's doubts immediately irritated Serena and Lucy, who had both strongly vouched for Beryl. Mei-Jin calmly explained that he wasn't questioning Beryl's reputation out of disrespect. He simply wanted to ensure the adventurers' safety, especially since there had been recent reports of unusual monster activity. Nidus understood Megan's concerns and asked what Beryl would need to do in order to prove himself. After thinking for a moment, Mei-Jin declared that if Beryl could win a duel against Serena, who held a prestigious black rank, he'd acknowledge Beryl's qualifications. Serena enthusiastically agreed to the proposal, leaving Beryl with no room to argue. Seeing that everyone was on board, Nidus decided to arrange the duel immediately. Not long after, Beryl and Serena were already standing face to face on the training grounds, surrounded by a large, enthusiastic crowd. Everyone was eager to see the legendary Serena in action and to find out exactly who her opponent was. Serena herself could hardly contain her excitement, thrilled by the opportunity to cross swords with her master once again. Back when Serena was just a kid, she and her parents were traveling with a merchant caravan. During their journey, however, the caravan was suddenly attacked by a beast that tore the carriage apart. In a final desperate act to save their daughter, her parents threw her off a nearby cliff, making her the only one to survive that tragic day. When she finally regained consciousness, the first thing she saw was Beryl standing over her. He gently took Serena back to his house, carefully treating her wounds, and once she had begun to recover, he started asking her some gentle questions. She managed to tell him her name was Serena, but the moment he brought up her parents, she quickly became overwhelmed with panic. Noticing her distress, Beryl told her to forget the questions and just rest until she was ready. With no place else to go, Beryl approached his parents to see if they'd be willing to let her stay with them, at least until they found her a new home. His parents happily agreed, and from that moment onward, Serena practically became part of their family. Initially, she struggled to open up and felt unsure about her new environment, but one morning, she caught sight of Beryl training diligently with his sword outside. Noticing her interest, Beryl warmly invited her to join him, sensing it might help her come out of her shell. From then on, Serena spent as much time as she could training alongside Beryl, as he patiently taught her the fundamentals of swordsmanship. The bond between the two grew stronger day by day. Gradually, Serena started becoming more outgoing and confident. One morning, as Beryl was preparing for classes at his dojo, he found Serena already waiting outside, sword in hand, eager to train. With a smile, he invited her to join the class, pleased to see how seriously she took her training. Serena had grown deeply attached to Beryl and his family, and would have been content to stay forever. Eventually, though, a family arrived, willing to adopt her. Beryl and his parents believed that moving in with a new family was best for Serena's future, so they gently encouraged her to go. But deep down, Serena truly didn't want to leave, yet she didn't want to burden Beryl either, so she thanked him sincerely for everything and reluctantly went her own way. Several years later, Serena had already become a skilled, gold-ranked adventurer. While on an escort mission, her caravan was suddenly ambushed by a group of bandits led by a swordsman infamous for his deadly skills. Her teammate warned her to be cautious. But before he even finished speaking, Serena had already leaped fearlessly into battle, quickly defeating every bandit there without breaking a sweat. There were two main reasons Serena had chosen to become an adventurer. Firstly, she was driven by a desire to prevent others from experiencing the same kind of tragedy she endured. Secondly, she wanted to honor everything Beryl taught her by putting her skills to real use. Now, with the opportunity to duel her former mentor after 20 long years, she was determined to show him just how far she'd come. Beryl isn't exactly thrilled about the duel, but the excitement on Serena's face was unmistakable. As her former master, he felt it was his duty to give her a fight worth remembering. As the match began, Serena launches herself forward, unleashing a relentless barrage of swift and precise sword strikes. Her movements were incredibly fast, yet Beryl matched each of them effortlessly, leaving her unable to land even a single blow. Serena's excitement only grew as they fought, enjoying every second of the chance to battle someone at full strength without holding back. For his part, Beryl was genuinely proud to see how far Serena had come. It was clear she dedicated herself fully to training ever since she left him. But she's not quite flawless yet because he spots a slight stiffness in her left-hand swings. It's subtle, but enough for him to exploit. With perfect timing, he slipped his sword through the handle of her blade, disarming her in one swift move. Serena quickly tried to counterattack with her other sword, but Beryl smoothly swept her legs from beneath her, leaving her sprawled on the ground with his blade pointed gently at her neck. With that, Beryl officially won the duel. The audience around them erupted into applause, and the others quickly came down to congratulate him. Mei Jen approached, sincerely apologizing for ever doubting Beryl's abilities. Beryl brushed it off kindly, assuring him it was completely normal to be skeptical of a teacher he'd never seen in action. Now fully convinced of Beryl's strength, Mei Jen gladly welcomed him as the guild's special instructor. The next morning, Beryl found himself standing in front of a dungeon entrance with his new adventurous students, Porta, Nadrai, and Sarlacats. As they ventured into the dungeon, Sarlacat's magic watch began to glow, warning them of 6 monsters lying ahead. The students immediately prepared for battle. Beryl and Serena were there only to oversee their safety, so they stepped back, allowing the students to handle the monsters on their own. The three quickly engaged with the goblins and managed to defeat them swiftly, demonstrating impressive teamwork and coordination. As they continued deeper into the dungeon, the rest of the exploration went smoothly. Soon enough, they had explored the entire dungeon without any serious incidents, and began to make their way back toward the entrance. While returning, Beryl felt slightly uneasy, noticing there seemed to be fewer monsters than he expected. Suddenly, as Porta moved toward the dungeon's exit, Sarlacat's magic watch violently shattered, detecting something far more powerful than it was designed for. Beryl urgently shouted a warning to Porta, but it was too late because Porta was suddenly grabbed by the unseen threat. The young adventurer was badly wounded, but still alive, desperately in need of immediate medical attention. However, Beryl and Serena knew they couldn't help him until the powerful creature was dealt with first, and that wouldn't be easy. Standing before them was a legendary monster known as the Xenograble, a specially designated target infamous for its terrifying strength. Even the most seasoned adventurers would struggle to survive an encounter with such a beast, yet there was no choice. Beryl and Serena prepared themselves, ready to fight for their lives. Beryl then starts thinking that he is seriously regretting coming on this assignment, but at least Serena is here with him. And since she's a black-ranked adventurer, dealing with a griffin shouldn't be an issue for her. And while she's busy with that, Beryl intends to rush over and help Porta. But when he reaches out for a healing potion, Serena was already thinking the same thing and quickly gives him a high five and declares she'll handle helping Porta herself while he deals with the griffin. And unfortunately for Beryl, he doesn't even get the chance to protest because the griffin suddenly lunges at him, forcing him to dodge quickly, leaving him no option but to engage in combat. As the griffin swipes at him, Beryl adeptly deflects its claws with his sword, and when a chance arises, he swiftly targets the griffin's legs. But badly for him, the creature's scales are incredibly tough, rendering his strike ineffective. He's essentially stuck on the defensive now, but he needs to hold out long enough for Serena to secure Porta's safety. But then while he glances back to check on Serena, he momentarily drops his guard, nearly costing him his life. Thankfully, he manages to block the griffin's attack just in time, although he's still severely wounded. He needs a strategy to bring this creature down fast, or it'll finish him off first. Normally, Beryl would concentrate his strikes on the monster's head, but since it can breathe fire, there's no chance he can approach it head-on. Instead, Beryl decides to flank it, but the griffin notices him immediately and counters by swinging its tail. Nevertheless, Beryl swiftly recovers and cleanly severs the griffin's tail in one strike. This sends the griffin into a fury, prompting it to launch a huge fireball at Beryl, who barely manages to leap out of the way. He expected the griffin to become enraged after losing its tail, but he didn't anticipate it charging directly at him. The griffin crashes headfirst into Beryl, and although the impact hurts like hell, he's still standing, allowing him to reposition himself and try to weather the creature's rampage. But that's far more challenging than anticipated, since Beryl is now desperately clinging to the griffin's back as it suddenly takes flight, soaring straight upward. A fall from this altitude would surely kill him, so he holds on for dear life, which only serves to infuriate the griffin further. It eventually descends again, allowing Beryl to leap off, but now the griffin is fully unleashing its power. It uses magic to heat the earth beneath it, transforming the ground into molten lava. So, Beryl scrambles onto a rock to prevent himself from being burned alive. But he's not the only one at risk because the lava is flowing toward the caves, and it's only a matter of moments before the trapped young kids inside turn crispy. Beryl then hears the kids' desperate cries for help, so he pushes aside any thoughts of self-preservation and immediately charges across the lava, relying on his boots to keep him from getting scorched for now. He clashes with the griffin again, but even now, he struggles to pierce through its armor like hide. The beast then unleashes another barrage of firewalls, forcing Beryl into a frantic dance of dodging and weaving across the molten ground. One of the blasts detonates near him, sending Beryl flying into the air, but he manages to turn the momentum to his advantage, plunging his sword straight into the griffin's eye midair. The griffin howls in agony, thrashing violently to throw him off. The good news is that now the monster is half-blind with Beryl's sword lodged deep into its eye socket. The bad news? Beryl is now weaponless, with no blade left to defend himself or counterattack, and the griffin, driven wild by pain, looks ready to tear him apart. Just as it seems like all hope is lost, the griffin suddenly glances upward, and there soaring down from the cliff above is Serena. She descends at full speed, crashing into the griffin with a devastating blow that slams it into the ground. And before the beast can recover, Serena reacts swiftly, slicing its throat in one clean strike, ending the battle once and for all. Serena then spots Beryl's broken blade jutting from the griffin's ruined eye and quickly apologizes, feeling guilty for not being there to help him sooner. Beryl brushes off her apology, saying he's not worried about that right now because what matters most is the trainee's safety. Right on cue, the kids emerge from the cave, miraculously unharmed aside from a few minor burns. Relieved, the group returns to the Adventurers Guild to report the incident. The guild master is absolutely floored when he hears that Beryl and Serena managed to defeat a named monster. Serena wastes no time giving credit where it's due, stating that if Beryl hadn't been there to support them, she likely wouldn't have made it through the fight. Beryl tries to point out that Serena delivered the final blow, but she clearly isn't interested in taking any of the spotlight for herself. Impressed by their success, the guild master promises to repay Beryl someday for his efforts, but for now though he offers Beryl a formal invitation to join the Adventurers Guild as a full-fledged adventurer. But Beryl immediately turns him down without a second thought. Afterward, Beryl and Serena step outside, and Serena apologizes once again, admitting that Beryl only got dragged into all this because she had been bragging about his strength to everyone. Beryl assures her that he doesn't mind, though he still feels like he's not deserving of all the praise being thrown his way. Still, Serena insists that he was truly incredible out there, and she's grateful she got to stand beside him in a real fight where their lives were on the line. Beryl thanks her too, pointing out that every decision she made was on the mark, and it's thanks to her judgment that everyone came back alive. Serena lights up hearing his words, though she humbly says she doesn't think she earned such praise. But Beryl disagrees, telling her flat out that she's grown into a fantastic adventurer and deserves every bit of the recognition. The following morning, Beryl wakes up early determined to deal with his broken sword. The problem is, he's not familiar with the capital's layout yet, so he asks Kuruni if she can show him the way to a blacksmith. He thanks her for accepting the favor on such short notice, but Kuruni says she was heading to the blacksmith anyway, so it's no trouble at all. And of course, Alicia decides to tag along too, not because she's jealous or anything. She claims she's tagging along purely because choosing a new sword is an important matter, and she wants to help Beryl pick wisely. But deep down she knows she's already missed so many chances to spend time with him, and she can't let this one slip away too. Eventually, they arrive at the blacksmith's workshop, where the owner steps out to greet Kuruni. However, his attention quickly snaps to Beryl, and the man freezes, looking absolutely stunned. Turns out, this blacksmith Balder used to be one of Beryl's students back in the day. And yes, even though he was technically older than Beryl at the time, he's still trained under him. Balder had wanted to master swordsmanship because he believed it would make him a better blacksmith, and despite the age difference, he had taken Beryl's lessons very seriously. Judging by the impressive shop he's built, it's clear that Balder's dedication paid off. And since everyone is gathered here, Balder asks what they need help with. Kuruni steps forward mentioning she needs her short sword sharpened. Balder happily agrees and asks her to hand it over. Kuruni passes him the blade and Balder examines it carefully, turning it over in his hands. After a long moment of silence, he lets out a deep sigh, drops the sword onto the counter, and tells her bluntly that the weapon is beyond saving because she's completely ruined it. Alicia then comments that it is strange that Karini managed to ruin her sword, considering how careful and precise she usually is during training. But if that's really the case, then there's only one logical explanation, and Beryl quickly catches on. He turns to Karini and asks her what it feels like when she holds the short sword. After thinking about it for a second, Karini replies that the sword feels light to her. In the moment Beryl and Balder hear that, they both immediately realize what the issue is. They explain to Karini that she isn't cut out for wielding a short sword, because if you can't properly feel the weight of your weapon, you'll never be able to use it effectively. With that settled, they agree it's time to find her a new blade. Beryl then suggests that she might actually be better suited for a two-handed great sword. Karini may look small, but she's strong enough to handle the extra weight without much trouble. He hands her a great sword to try out, and even though it feels a lot heavier than what she's used to, it's still manageable. Confident she can swing it well enough, Karini decides to buy it, especially since Beryl recommended it himself. Plus, she thinks it looks awesome slung across her back. With Karini's business taken care of, Beryl starts browsing Balder's selection to find a replacement for his own broken sword. However, Alicia immediately jumps in, insisting that a swordsman of his level should have a custom forged weapon, but Beryl doesn't really think that's necessary. He figures any good quality sword from here should be more than enough for him. But while he's still browsing, the front door bursts open and Serena walks in, landing a massive sack over her shoulder. At the moment Alicia and Serena make eye contact, they start bickering as usual, because neither of them can stand the other. Beryl quickly steps in to steer the conversation back on track and asks Serena why she's here. Serena explains that she's got a special job for Balder, then she slams the sack onto the counter and pulls it open to reveal the leg of the griffin they defeated together. She tells Balder that she wants him to forge a long sword out of the beast's remains. Balder is stunned because it's the first time he's ever been asked to craft a sword from a named monster's corpse. Still, he's a bit puzzled why Serena would want a long sword, considering she's famous for her twin blade style, but Serena clarifies that the sword isn't for her. It's meant to be a gift for Beryl. Beryl immediately protests, saying he doesn't deserve something so valuable. He reminds her that she was the one who delivered the final blow to the griffin, so she should be the one to keep the material. But she's adamant about it, insisting that gifting him this sword is the least she can do to make up for the blade he lost during the fight. Balder then cuts in the conversation and tells Beryl to just accept the gift already, not because he's siding with Serena, but because he's genuinely excited about crafting a legendary sword from named monster materials. And seeing no way around it, Beryl finally agrees to let Balder use the griffin's leg to forge a blade for him. Although judging by the glint in Balder's eye, he can already tell this blacksmith is planning something outrageous. So, he warns Balder that he only wants a normal practical sword, and Balder solemnly promises he won't create anything ridiculous. Yet for some reason, Beryl doesn't feel very reassured. Either way, Balder says it'll take a week to complete his masterpiece, and Beryl is fine with that schedule. Then since their errands are now finished, Beryl suggests they head out. Just as he says that, Karini steps up to him with a cheerful grin, asking for a quick favor. Fast forward to the dojo, and we see Karini holding a wooden version of her new great sword, and since she's never used a weapon like this before, she asks Beryl to give her some private coaching. Beryl explains that a great sword has two major advantages. First, it lets you deliver massive force behind your swings, so it's best to focus on wide, lateral strikes to maximize momentum. Second, you can grip it by the ricasso to boost control during combat. Karini tests it out, and as she swings, it sparks a rush of old memories. Back when she trained under Beryl at his dojo, she spent countless hours practicing basic sword forms just like this. Later that evening, Beryl is walking home alone, when he notices a small child approaching him from the opposite direction. Normally he wouldn't think much of it, but as they pass, the girl suddenly tries to slip her hand inside his jacket to steal his wallet. Beryl instantly catches her wrist before she can escape, but the little thief blasts him in the face with fire magic to break free. Forced to shield himself, Beryl has no choice but to let go, and she bolts off into the night. The girl eventually makes her way into a battered old building, filled with rough-looking men gambling and drinking. As she walks past them, she tosses a small pile of stolen money onto the table. The men grumble, disappointed with how little she brought back, accusing her of slacking off. But their boss quickly silences them, reminding everyone that Miri would never dare slack off because she understands the consequences if she ever crosses him. Miri stays stone-faced, knowing exactly how brutal a boss can be, so she can't afford to repeat more mistakes. But then a wave of panic hits her because she notices that she has lost something important. And then we notice that in her rush to escape from Beryl, she accidentally dropped her ring, and we see that Beryl now has it in his possession. The following day inside the training arena, Karini continues practicing with her newly acquired great sword, while Henblitz spars against Beryl at the other end of the hall. Up until now, Henblitz hasn't successfully landed even one hit against Beryl, so as he rushes forward for one final attack, he fakes an overhead swing before swiftly redirecting his blade toward Beryl's midsection. Beryl acknowledges the clever move but still manages to counter it flawlessly, leaving Henblitz defeated once again. Henblitz expresses his gratitude for and Beryl commends him for improving so significantly in such a short period. The maneuver was nearly flawless, yet still not quick enough to surpass Beryl's reactions. Right at that moment, Henblitz glances toward Kuruni and comments on how courageous it was for her to abruptly switch to a completely new weapon, adding that she shows considerable potential. Moreover, it's crucial for the Knight's Order to enhance its combat abilities so they can confront the notorious bandit group known as the Dark Hand of Twilight. The Twilight Thieves have started operating within the capital, causing significant disruptions, prompting the Royal Guard and the Knight's Order to launch an investigation. Once they pinpoint the thieves' hideout, they intend to raid it immediately and capture every member. But as a precaution, they'll require all the manpower they can gather, and Kuruni happens to possess impressive strength. Naturally, Henblitz believes Beryl alone would likely be more than capable of taking down the Twilight Thieves single-handedly, but he prefers not to trouble Beryl with mundane tasks like this. He reassures him that the Knight's Order can handle the fighting entirely on their own, which is perfectly fine with Beryl, since he wasn't particularly eager to get involved anyway. He's never dealt with ordinary criminals before and doesn't plan to start now, but then he recalls the ring he obtained from the pickpocket yesterday, and wonders if it might be useful in their investigation. Yet the moment Kuruni spots the ring in his hand, she jumps to the conclusion that Beryl's planning to gift it to someone, and Henblitz seems to agree. But before Beryl can correct them, Kuruni chimes in, teasing that he might want to choose a bigger ring if he's planning to propose to Alicia because this one looks tiny and probably only fits a child's finger. Beryl is completely baffled at how they've reached this wild assumption, but finally manages to speak up and clarify that the ring isn't a gift. He explains that yesterday he was targeted by a pickpocket and luckily, he caught the thief's wrist before she could grab anything, but she still managed to escape after catching him off guard by casting fire magic. Kuruni finds the whole situation peculiar because if the girl truly was capable of using magic, she wouldn't have any reason to resort to pickpocketing. Magic is an extremely rare ability, so anyone capable of casting spells can enroll at the Magic Institute free of charge, where all the living costs are fully covered. Henblitz speculates that perhaps the girl was using some sort of enchanted accessory to produce the fire, but regardless he asks Beryl what he intends to do with the ring. Beryl replies he has no interest in keeping it, and since it's probably stolen property, he'd prefer returning it to whoever originally owned it. If that's the case, Henblitz advises him to leave the ring at the Knight's Order front desk, and that's precisely what Beryl proceeds to do. Now that the matter of the ring is settled, Beryl doesn't plan on becoming involved further. After all, he didn't actually lose anything to the thief, and he certainly isn't interested in tracking her down, yet somehow the expression she had when he caught her continues to bother him. While strolling through the city later, Beryl decides to check out local housing auctions, as he can't realistically live at an inn forever, but the prices nearly cause him to faint from shock. Technically, he can afford it considering the salary provided by the Knight's Order, but it's still a huge amount of money to spend. At that moment, he notices a girl standing behind him, seemingly searching for something, so he approaches to see if she needs assistance. But once he gets a closer view of her face, he immediately recognizes her as the girl who attempted to rob him the previous night. He asks if she might be searching for a certain ring, but as soon as she hears him mention it, the girl instantly attacks him, thinking he's stolen it. Beryl quickly asks her to calm down as he'd prefer not to create a public spectacle. First of all, he explains to her that he left the ring at the Knight's Order front desk, meaning he no longer has it in his possession, and the girl clearly can't just stroll into the Knight's Order headquarters to reclaim it. Secondly, Beryl questions whether she actually stole the ring herself, as it's strange she'd go through all this trouble to retrieve it unless it was personally valuable to her. She firmly states she didn't steal the ring, and that's sufficient for Beryl, so he instructs her to follow him so he can help her recover it. Mui initially hesitates to accompany him, but he points out it would be difficult for her to prove ownership on her own. But if Beryl personally vouches for her, retrieving the ring shouldn't take much time at all. Mui reluctantly agrees to follow along, though she clearly conveys that she's far from pleased about the arrangement. Then after they make it to the Knight's Order headquarters, Beryl retrieves the ring, but before handing it over to Mui, he says he wants to talk with her briefly. At that very moment, Alicia steps outside, and when she notices Beryl arguing with Mui, the first thing she assumes is that the girl must be some secret love child he's been hiding, though Beryl immediately denies this claim. They all go inside, allowing Beryl a chance to fully explain the entire situation to Alicia, and once she's aware of what's happening, she asks Beryl how he preferred to handle Mui. Typically, as a knight, Alicia would be responsible for arresting Mui due to theft, but Beryl prefers not to get her into trouble. He then directly asks Mui if she'll stop pickpocketing if he lets her leave, but instead of answering his question, she merely demands he return the ring to her. She obviously has no intention of quitting stealing, but her unwillingness to lie about it convinces Beryl she's fundamentally an honest child. Alicia then recalls hearing that Mui had used magic against Beryl, prompting her to inquire whether she used a magical item or if the magic was innate. Mui says she cast the spell on her own, so Alicia explains that if she truly possesses magical talent, Kingdom would gladly take responsibility for her welfare, meaning she wouldn't need to rely on stealing anymore. Mui gradually begins to open up, eventually revealing that she can't stop pickpocketing because she urgently needs 5 million dalk. Her boss promised her that if she gives him that exact amount, he'll use magic to resurrect her sister, but since she doesn't have enough time to earn that money through legal means, she turned to crime instead. Beryl instantly recognizes that Mui's boss must be deceiving her, because resurrection simply isn't possible, though he's aware there's no chance she would believe him if he tried telling her that now. At this point, Alicia decides to leave temporarily, stating there's something important she needs to verify. Meanwhile, Beryl and Mui remain alone together. Beryl kindly asks her if she would like some cookies, and although Mui declines, it's obvious she's hungry, so he comes up with an alternative idea. He briefly steps away and returns shortly after with a loaf of bread from Mui. The moment he hands it over, Mui tears into it ravenously. Watching her eat, Beryl feels relieved that he ran into her today because he's been worried ever since he saw the sadness in her eyes yesterday. So being able to help her, even just a little, makes him feel pleased. With all of that said, he decides he's kept Mui long enough and returns the ring to her, and now that she's recovered what she came for, Mui announces she's leaving. But right before she can exit, Lucy suddenly storms in after Alicia informed her about Mui's magical talent. Lucy introduces herself as the leader of the Magical Corps and warmly invites Mui to enroll at a magical institute, emphasizing her always eager to welcome new magic users. Nevertheless, Mui declines the offer, explaining that attending the Magical Institute won't help her earn the 5 million dalk she needs. Lucy then inquires about the reason Mui needs such an enormous sum, prompting Mui to reveal she intends to pay a wizard to resurrect her deceased sister. But the moment Mui says that shit, Lucy immediately informs her that she's being tricked, since resurrection magic simply doesn't exist. Despite Lucy's words, Mui stubbornly insists her sister really can be resurrected because she personally witnessed it, or at least that's what she believes happened. In reality, as seen in her memories, all the supposed wizard actually did was slightly move her sister's corpse, and Mui, overcome with grief, instantly believed he genuinely had the power to resurrect her sibling. The wizard then claimed it would require 5 million dalk to fully revive Mui's sister, and since then she's resorted to stealing to accumulate that money. Lucy feels sympathetic toward Mui for falling victim to such a cruel deception, but again firmly emphasizes to her that resurrection magic simply doesn't exist. Mui angrily accuses Lucy of lying, but Lucy clarifies that she's an extremely respected mage who's studied magic for several hundred years. Therefore, if resurrection magic truly existed, she'd definitely know about it far earlier than some random, fraudulent wizard. At this point, Mui begins realizing she may have indeed been deceived, prompting Lucy to request the identity of the wizard responsible for this situation. Mui suspiciously asks why Lucy wants to know, so Lucy calmly explains that she plans to confront the wizard directly to determine whether he's genuinely capable of resurrection magic or simply deceiving her. In the highly unlikely event that he's being truthful, Lucy vows she'll personally pay the 5 million dalk needed to revive Mui's sister. However, if the man is indeed lying, then he has dishonored Mui's sister's memory, something Lucy absolutely refuses to forgive. Mui reluctantly reveals the wizard's name is Twilight, the same as the infamous leader of the Twilight Thieves, prompting Lucy to ask Mui to immediately leave her to him. Alicia volunteers to join as well, but her presence as a knight would attract too damn much attention, so she asks Beryl to accompany them instead. Shortly after, they reach the entrance to Twilight's hideout, and Beryl is surprised that a thieves' den is located directly off the main street. Beryl begins to regret not borrowing an actual sword for this confrontation, but Lucy reassures him that given his abilities, a wooden sword should be entirely sufficient against ordinary bandits. There's no reason to delay any further, so Lucy blasts open the front door, instantly drawing the attention of several thieves. One of the thieves attempts to grab Lucy by her quarter melon, but she has no time to waste on a pervert like him, so she effortlessly blows the attacker aside and instructs Beryl to handle the rest while she confronts Twilight personally. The thieves then notice Mui standing behind Beryl, recognizing her as the traitor who exposed their location, prompting one of them to rush at her aggressively. However, Beryl swiftly jabs him right in the throat. He's only wielding a wooden sword, so the bandits probably won't suffer anything fatal, but a hit to the throat with a wooden blade still stings like hell, making them think twice before advancing further. As Beryl occupies the enemies upstairs, Lucy makes her way into the basement to challenge Twilight. The moment he spots her, he uses a magical accessory to drop ice projectiles onto Lucy, but Lucy is an extremely skilled mage, so a simple attack like this can't possibly hold her back. She effortlessly melts through the ice, though Twilight quickly pulls out another magical accessory, employing telekinesis to lift Lucy into the air, and she immediately realizes this must be how he deceived Mui. Twilight openly admits he used telekinesis to manipulate her sister's corpse, and then pretended it was necromancy, mocking how absurdly naive Mui had been to genuinely believe he possessed resurrection powers. He then forms a fireball, intending to eliminate Lucy once and for all, but Lucy's patience has completely worn thin by now, so she swiftly unleashes a wind spell directly at Twilight and knocks him unconscious with the force. At the same time upstairs, Beryl had already taken care of nearly all the thugs, but one of them staggered back to his feet and started calling Mui an ungrateful kid after everything Twilight supposedly did for her. That insult really set Beryl off, so he struck him in the throat again, knocking the man out flat. Shortly after, Lucy came up from the basement, dragging Twilight's limp body with her, and she demanded he tell Mui the truth unless he wanted to get blasted with wind magic again. Twilight reluctantly admits to Mui that he'd been lying about resurrection magic all along, leaving Mui absolutely heartbroken as she realizes this means her sister was truly gone for good. Now that all the thieves have been neutralized, Lucy announces she'll go alert the Knight's Order so they can arrest Twilight and his gang. A little while later, all the captured bandits have been loaded onto a cart to be taken away to prison. Alicia thanks Beryl and Lucy for their valuable assistance. However, there's still plenty of investigating left to do, because those magical accessories Twilight had been using were far too powerful for someone like him to acquire alone. That implies there's someone else manipulating events behind the scenes, and they need to figure out exactly who that person is. As Twilight and the rest of the thugs were being hauled away, an unknown man was secretly watching quietly from the shadows. The hooded figure then extends his hand toward the cart, and abruptly Twilight's body begins glowing from within, moments before he suffers an agonizing death. Later, the hooded man reports to his superior that Twilight has been effectively silenced, thanks to the magical device they implanted inside him, eliminating any possibility of their plans being exposed. The Pope was pleased by the news, since he planned to use the corpses Twilight had gathered to craft his own version of a miracle, and he wasn't going to let anything interfere with his ambitions now.